Yeah.
You can't get rid of me.
Hello, everyone. It is Thursday evening, and you know what time that is? It is time for
time
the
to push
authors.
buttons.
Yes, it's time to get the show going. Welcome to the Author's Dilemma this week. This week is going to be a fantastic conversation on how our careers and life experiences shape our writing stories. And we're glad to have you here. I am J.E. Jack, and I write urban fantasy, horror, and paranormal thrillers.
I'm Hyrum Hawks. I write hard sci-fi and sci-fantasy.
I'm Jennifer Carr, and I write clean contemporary romance and Christian romantic suspense.
And you are listening to us, and we appreciate you being here. If you do happen to have a question this evening or in the future, if you're listening to this some other time, please be sure to reach out to us at the Author's Dilemma or authorsdilemma@gmail.com. We'd love to answer any questions you may have about tonight or any episode or any of them. So tonight, well, first off, what's going on in your business, Hyrum?
Well, I've got an email in my inbox that's mocking me, saying that my first book, The Persian Asteroid, is ready for review in ACX. That means the audiobook has a first draft done. I get to listen to it and find all the little teeny dumb mistakes, because I'm sure we'll all make them. The reader sounds great so far. So I'm excited.
Mm-hmm.
We are still not sure if he's going to if he's going to have his name on it, since the book does have potential, since it is, the Iranians will not like it. The government, the people will like it. But yeah, so that's fun. That's the big thing. I have not had time to write this week. I might, as we will talk about in a minute, day job trumps all. When I just started a new contract, and that has been everything. I traveled and got lots of motion sickness on airplanes. So yeah.
So do you usually get motion sickness on airplanes?
Absolutely. It's part of why I hate traveling for work, but I've
Gosh, you're a glutton for punishment then.
Traveled the whole world. Yeah.
What can I stand the most? I'm going to do that.
Yeah, I did not do it on purpose. But there's, if you ever need to go to the Walgreens or whatever your favorite CVS type store, they have ginger chews or ginger lozenges or whatever. They really do help. So I live off of those.
Huh.
And then you don't have to drink the calories of a ginger ale.
There you go.
Unless
So
you
Jen,
like that.
Jen, what's going on in your world? Seems like a lot.
It's a lot. It is a lot. And none of it has been writing related. For me personally, I have recorded many, many podcasts. I had 4 yesterday, and the third one of the day made it through the whole thing, said goodbye, and then I went back to start replaying it, and there was no sound. There was no sound. It recorded video with no sound. And so I had to, and I was using StreamYard, but so I was like, oh my God, what do I do? So I'm like sitting here and I'm like clicking through the whole video. There's no sound. There's no sound. And so I emailed him and I was like, good news and bad news. That was a great conversation. I loved it. The bad news is there's no sound. So we can either reschedule, or we could just play the video and do a bad lip reading over it. And he was like, if you're free in June, we can re-record it. And I said, perfect. Let's do that instead.
I would have done the bad lip reading.
I know. I was just like, man, a lot. It was so crazy because I did 4 total yesterday. And all 3 out of 4 were perfectly fine. So I don't know if there was a glitch in the matrix. I don't know.
That's interesting.
It was. So anyway, it's good times, but podcasting
I
has
was
been
looking at
over.
StreamYard. Your podcast, you've got at least over a dozen in the queue on the StreamYard?
Yeah, I was almost worried. Because I was like, "Where's ours at? Where's that?"
It was at the very end. I had to click look more.
Yeah.
No, I wish there was a better way to do that.
No, it's all good. So, what about your editor? Like, what's going on with that? If you don't mind me asking.
No, I don't mind you asking. We have started making forward progress, and that I do think that I will have it to my beta readers by June 1st. So I feel pretty good about that.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Just right around there. I tell you, this year has gone by
Yes.
extremely
2 weeks into
fast.
May. I know.
Yeah, I'm like, And I feel like we just started this podcast, and we did and we did, but it was in January, and now we're already in May. That's crazy.
Yeah.
School's out in 2 weeks.
School's out, and of course, now the censors are going to take, they're going to censor that, and I'm not going to be able to hear it because we don't have the royalty for it. Anyway, all right. So what's going on in my world? Gosh, well, the day job's trucking along. Yeah. I still have my book going through the one that I'm getting the audiobook for, Grave Disturbance, still working on that. Listen to the 15-minute thing. Sounds great. Looking forward to rock and roll with that. He does a really good job. Sean Walpole is his name. He's an upcoming narrator. He has quite a few books out, and he does a really good job. Let's see what else. I started doing more TikTok videos. So those of you that are on TikTok and you follow me, you've probably seen a couple more. I'm gonna try to do a couple more of those. Oh, I finally got my newsletter working.
Yeah,
So
I read it.
Yeah. So I finally got that working, and that was something I worked on this past week. And I'm like, finally, I'm going to do it. And so there's, slowly but surely, I haven't done any writing. I finished a short story, I think either last week. And here again, the days are starting to run by because I don't, I don't know who I am half the time. But so moving along. As long as there's forward momentum, right? I mean, as long as you're doing something in your business weekly, it's the time's going to pass anyway. So every step forward is a step forward.
Yeah, I don't think there's any wasted activity as long as you're doing something productive and not just spinning your wheels.
Yes. Well, I do that too. Well, right. Yeah. So instead of doom scrolling, I'm making videos for TikTok.
But that's good though. That's useful because that pulls people in. It builds your platform.
Yeah.
It puts eyes on you.
Right. So, what is the news for the week?
First, we have a hey.
Well.
Oh my gosh.
Hi, Kim.
It's Kim Shishak Madison.
She's hung out with us before, I think.
She has, and she has a business doing door decorations.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Welcome so you should check. Yes, welcome back. I hope her writing is good if she ever sends me anything.
There is some fun arguments going on the threads, and I'm sure elsewhere, maybe on TikTok. I have sworn off TikTok, so I don't know.
Hirum's got the
Do
tea
authors
tonight.
belong on arcs?
So do I. Do authors
belong on arc teams? All
right, and so
reading other people's books.
Yeah, and so for those that may be new to the whole authoring world, ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copies.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically what happens at that stage, you send out your books, people read them, and they give feedback, or they give reviews or whatever.
Reviews is generally the goal.
Right.
It's part of your marketing strategy.
Yeah, because that's the only... ARCs are how I got a dozen or so reviews on my book. I still... don't get me started on how much I don't want to do marketing, but that I at least can get people to read my book who I personally give it to, and then they like it so far. But ARC readers, that I'm not even sure, even after reading all this stuff, I'm not sure what the heck is going on in this controversy. But there are authors arguing authors don't belong on ARC teams, and others are saying yes, they do. That's one of the core things is authors join each other's ARC teams to flesh them out. So I don't really have an opinion either way, because if it weren't for authors, I would have no ARC reviews. I'd maybe a few, but what do you guys think?
That sounds like a discussion that I'm not a part of.
I do have an opinion. Surprise.
Yeah.
I think as far as like marketing, if they are doing it to drive attention, good or bad, right? Or like, if they're saying, hey, this person, read this person, read this person, read this person, but they're only doing it because it's an author friend, right? Like if they're giving a book that does not deserve 5 stars, does not deserve attention, but they're saying, hey, this book deserves all of these accolades because I said so. I think that's kind of, I don't want to say an abuse of power because authors don't really have power, but at the same time, but like I've ARC read for Hyrum, and I would ARC read for Josh, and I would, I give honest feedback, but I also know their writing, and so I trust that I can read it and actually give an honest opinion, and it would be a good one. But to just throw your name behind something, like, it feels kind of slimy to me. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I had that. I got several ARC reads for the Valley of Death that they also asked, "Can you do one in return?" And I was like, "I'll try," and I couldn't. I
Yeah.
read the book, and either it was so unpolished that I literally couldn't get through it. I'm not a person who thinks that all the grammar needs to be correct, but I do need to at least comprehend it. Like, if the grammar is so
Mhm.
bad that I can't comprehend what the book is saying, then
Yeah.
you need to re-edit. But also, some of them, it's like, I am not going to read this. I'm not going to read smut. I'm not going to read
Mhm.
things that depress me, which I'd say the depressing things are even worse because that would affect my mental health even more.
Right.
So I just can't do that. And so, yeah, I can see where it's good. I would never give a review on one of those because I don't feel I can give an honest review for starters, and because I'm not giving a 5-star to someone just because they're a fellow author.
Well, also, I think it's kind of one of those things that, even as an author, putting their weight of their name behind something, that says a lot about I mean, like, if someone did that to me and it sucked,
Yeah.
I would never trust anything they had to say after that. So,
Yes.
No.
it's kind of a detriment. To me, I guess I've always gotten confused as far as like the beta part and the ARC reader part, because I kind of treat it the same.
Oh,
I guess.
definitely not.
Oh, I know.
The way the world
I know that
treats it
now.
is all for review.
We've had that conversation.
Yeah. I know that now, but yeah. So it's almost like it's almost worrisome to give my books to other authors, to be honest with you, because it's just like,
Yeah.
because at the end of that stage, I don't even like my own writing. I find it depressing. It's like I don't like this. This is horrible writing. This is the worst
Terrible
stuff
book.
ever.
1 star.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Half a star,
D and F.
Yeah. That's really weird. Yeah, it's so strange what people get so wrapped up about,
Yeah. I think the biggest takeaway I have for it
mhm.
is that authors need to lighten up. That's it. We all need to lighten up.
But there's
We need to get outside more, is what you're saying.
That's probably true.
Touch grass.
Yeah, it's one of those stupid mental health walks. We need to take them. But I do think that there's a huge line between, there are some avid readers and book talkers who, they think authors need to stay off of Goodreads. They don't want authors' input on Goodreads. They don't want to hear, and because, for good reason, there have been some authors who have gone in and they've started blasting readers when they don't leave the reviews they want to read.
Well, see, I think that's messed up.
Oh, it
Right.
is messed up. It's so it's icky is what it is. And so I can see why readers want authors out of the picture for that kind of thing, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm a reader too.
But then again, it goes back to the brand that they're building for themselves, and if that's the kind of person that they want other people to know them as, well, that gives me plenty of ammo to not read their stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
So they're doing me a favor by being a jerk.
A jerk.
Well, that's actually one of the reasons I really, really don't like censorship of people, like by government fiat. Like, people are like, we got to stop hate speech. No, I want people to be free to be hateful
Offended.
online.
Please
because
offend
then
me.
I know, please, because then I can block you, then I can avoid you,
Right.
and then I can keep you out of my life. If the hate speech isn't allowed, I won't know who the bigots are.
That's true.
That's right. And honestly, I tell you the truth, when we talked briefly about this before, but I really wish there was an option to, like, if you see a video or if you see a post, like on some platforms, yes, you can hide it or whatever, but on other platforms you can't, and you just get fed all sorts of stuff. And sometimes I'd like to prune that out of my life.
Yes.
But
Mm-hmm.
I'll have a conversation about anything. I just may not agree with people.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's
So-
a good conversation though about authors and arcs.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
No. I think
It's too
I think
nuanced.
I think the problem is people, once they develop like an identity for themselves, like I'm a reader or I'm a reviewer or whatever, and the same thing with authors, right? I'm an author, I write books, whatever. then you kind of create this entitlement type of everybody, and all groups have it. Like me being a veteran, I see a lot of that. Me being in law enforcement, I see a lot of that. And I think either every group has that 10% that everybody else cringes at.
Oh,
and that's a problem.
Somehow with the loudest voice,
Well, like, right, because they feel entitled to be able to voice their opinion. So,
I think Josh, this might be a good story idea for you. You talk about the identity for police officers, for vets. What about that identity for criminals? Do they feel that they're part of it?
No, well, okay. Well, here again, I could be off because I'm not a criminal, right? But I mean, you see, I've heard stories, I've seen, but I've seen, especially like street gangs. Oh yeah, they want to get arrested. Mm-hmm. They want to go to jail because that gives them street cred. They it's all, in some law enforcement, that's a real thing. They want to be thugs. They or they want to look good for their gang, or it's, every segment of society has it, and they have that 10% that make it worse.
Oh yeah.
At least that's my opinion on it, what I've seen. So, is there any other? That's an interesting topic, though.
It is.
Nothing else I've seen.
Okay, so tonight we are going to talk about how our lives, our experiences, our careers, the things that we've done, how that affects our writing and what we tell in our stories. And I think it's going to be an interesting conversation, the last part of this, or this next segment of our conversation, just because all of us here come from very different walks of life. And we have very different ways of doing it or writing our stories too. So,
that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an alien from another planet. Oh,
you're not supposed to say that out loud.
Utah, another planet, same thing.
Well,
the quiet part.
There's a show called Alien Resident. Have y'all seen that at all?
No,
I've seen the previews for it.
It's kind of funny. Well, it has its moments. It's entertaining, and I've laughed a few times at it. But it's interesting.
Okay, but yeah, I think that our lived experiences do affect our writing. But one of the things I want to emphasize up front, and then we can dive into it, is our lived experiences do give us unique insights, but our other experiences that we gain vicariously can make up for that, for the lack. For sure. We don't all have to be superheroes to write about superheroes. We can hear other stories, we can use our imagination, but we do need to live a life in order to gain the key insight, which is what it is to be human. Oh, no. A lot of children try to tell stories, and they are very strange, mainly because they don't have lived experiences yet. I love my 10-year-old stories, but he hasn't the foggiest idea how anything works yet his stories are delightful because they do represent the deep core human nature. They just definitely follow a stream of consciousness and are kind of weird. But when he's got a few more years in him, like he's doing theater now, he's at the local children's theater.
That's fun.
And that's great because he's learning how to do things. He's learning how to get along with people. He's finding people he actually gets along with. He has not gotten along with the kids in the neighborhood who are more of the sports kids. And so he's finding friends. He's finding that he can make human connections. Mm-hmm. Well, as an author, that's great because he's making the human connection. And now he can start piecing together, other people make the same connection using different things. So as an engineer, I make connections most easily with other engineers. And yet I am married to the least scientific or engineering person you will ever meet. And we are best friends. Because the first thing I learned in my career is I don't want to ever be married to an engineer. We're nuts.
Yeah, you are. I married one.
Yeah, Jen Stalker is an engineer, and it's wonderful. But that's the thing. My career has led me to realize human nature, I can get along with anyone if I try hard enough. It's just a lot easier to get along with people that aren't exactly like me. So observing engineers over the years, I can see, I start seeing patterns. And then I start interacting with people who do like sports And
Mm-hmm.
the patterns are the same. They may not be the same
Sorry.
formula, but it's the same base equations. Like the equations themselves are the same, but like what variables go into it are different.
Okay, so when it comes to your writing, can you think of an instance where you've taken something that you've seen and included it in your writing, or
My entire first book.
okay,
Basically, my first book was the snarkiness of my favorite engineers, through in my anxiety and depression. But each of the main characters was basically another snarky engineer that I knew,
Mhm.
and they were in real life type situations. The only thing that I hadn't experienced myself was the getting kidnapped. Pretty much everything else was the kidnapping and the danger I have not experienced, but
Mhm.
the having to talk to investors, trying to convince people that my designs are good,
Mhm.
dealing with like technology, dealing with project management, dealing with really obnoxious people that are in charge of the people, the top level CEOs. All of those things were right out of my career.
Mm.
Now, my second book, not very much, because it was more fantasy and it was a lot more relationship focused, and not part of my career. But
Yeah.
I think that you can use a lot of what you learn in your writing and make it entertaining because you've been through it. You
Right.
know.
So, Jen, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my background, I spent many years studying and then practicing with psychology and all that good stuff. And so, yeah, my
Lazy
background I was people. Ugh. No, but it has given me.
Let me help you at arm's length.
Just stop it, people. Just stop it. That's all you got to do. Is just stop it. How hard is that? But no, seriously, it gave me, a lot of insight, and I've always been a people watcher anyway. But it gave me a deeper insight on why people do things and how people do things and how the brain gets you from point A to point B. And so, yeah, being able to infuse that into characters, yeah, that makes a big difference. Like that's where my background played into it. Was I think that my books are very character driven and less plot driven, and that's why.
Okay. Yeah. No. I would have to agree because like personally, I've lived through a lot of different extremes, good and bad. I got this little gnat that's like flying
I
around.
had
And
one
so
earlier. You can have it.
yeah. It came from your screen. It came from your house, from your screen to my screen.
It
Yeah.
snowed here 3 days ago. No bugs.
Yeah. That's one thing I miss about the
90 degrees
Southwest.
here. Oh my.
Yeah, same here. But yeah, so growing up, I wasn't into sports. I did have a couple friends, but I kind of kept to myself too. I think the biggest thing for me was I was a nerd, and then I had a huge heartbreak right after high school, and it changed who I was. Well, I was in the Marine Corps at the time, but there was a lot of life changes that happened in the Marine Corps, and then me going overseas. And I've always been kind of theatrical anyway, or artistically inclined, creatively inclined, and then I went overseas and I learned a lot about myself. And then what's interesting, after I got back from all that and got into law enforcement, a few years ago, I also got into life coaching. And there's a program by John Maxwell who, he teaches a lot about leadership and, kind of learning about human nature. And I learned a lot that way too. Now, I will say when I was in my early 20s, I was reading a lot of good books too, like How to Win Friends and Influence People and The Magic of Thinking Big, and some of these different I hate to call it self-help books because they're thought-provoking books, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just I think it's wrong to say self-help, right? Because it's illuminating. But I would say like all that. And I think every writer does, maybe not every writer, but like you wrote about what you knew in your first book, Hyrum.
Yeah.
The first two books, yes, I wrote about what I knew. In fact, if you read my first two books, those are almost obviously fiction and obviously dramatized, but a lot of that is my stories of me growing up. Like, yes, I did go to Southern Illinois. Yes, there was a girl named Mary that I liked. Yes, I have some cousins. Yes, they lived on a farm. Yes, there were some girls that lived down the street. Those are like taken right out of my life. and I use those. Now I've built the storytelling ability to now I can actually imagine some of this stuff, and along with my life experiences of being overseas, dealing with different cultures, being in law enforcement, dealing with different cultures. Um, I can include that in my books too.
Criminals.
Yeah, well, hey, there's some good people out there too. But I think, I think that's a normal thing. And then also like most of my books are or my latter two books are or I'm all over the place this evening, folks. With the urban fantasy, it deals with, police detective. And then my third book deals with a detective. So, I include a lot of my knowledge that I have from my day job as well. So yeah, I think it's normal. However, I must say this before anybody thinks that, they don't have an interesting life, that, hey, listen, someone's going to identify it with who you are, whether you have lived whether you've had a lot of opportunity or whether you've been, had a lot of different experiences, or you've had none. Maybe you haven't even left your city or village or whatever. People are still going to be interested in that. Like,
there's a day that everyone comes to when they experience Sonder, that realization that other people's lives are as deep and as interesting and as complex as their own. And that's a hugely important moment in becoming a self-actualized person, is that day. Like, I had that day probably in my teens, when I realized my parents were interesting. And every child needs to have that moment when they're like, wait a second, my parents are more than just mom and dad. Like, it might have been when I learned the story of, this is a great story and I should include it someday in a book. My dad, so he served an LDS mission, and he left. My mom and him wrote, but they weren't engaged, and so but he was very much in love with her. 2 years he's gone. They write the whole time. While he's gone, other people ask my mom out. I mean, she's a beautiful woman. She was, 17, 18. She was basically 18 and a half when my dad got home, and she'd been proposed to multiple times by this 6'10" guy who was rich. Doing, and like the latter proposals, he was implying that, this is the fancy car you'll get when you marry me, kind of bribing her to marry him.
Ooh.
But she just got a bad feeling about him. Well, my dad, he's 6 feet tall, very, very strong, very broader than me. And he gets home and he goes over to visit. And this guy is over at my mom's house, won't leave. He's just being obnoxious. She did not invite him over. He stands on the porch, so he's like over a foot taller than my dad at this point, and he's just trying to intimidate my dad. And my dad just looks at him, just ignores him, walks right by him into the house. And that was the moment my mom, like, truly fell in love with him. Saw him and was like, wow, you are so brave. Now, my dad didn't think anything of it, because this guy was trying to intimidate him. This is a very tall man who's very large and very rich. And no, my dad was like, get out of my way. I'm going to see the girl I'm in love with. And so that might have been the moment that I'm like, my dad is so cool.
He's a person.
And I think that's like what you were saying is once we realize that, you got to realize it about yourself too. Because sure, I'm not currently flying through the stars and, making interesting adventures, and I'm not Captain Kirk, but guess what? Neither is Captain Kirk. Captain Kirk is no cooler than you are. Your experiences are just as real, just as interesting, just as deep and moving. That's the reason. What are the most powerful stories? They're not the stories where everything gets blown up. Otherwise, the recent Marvel movies would all be amazing because they're just a bunch of stuff blowing up. No, the stories that catch us are the real stories, the stories about emotions and feelings and people. And so, yeah, the plot is important.
Well, and then
it's
also
good to have interesting, but you need person.
Perspective.
Yes.
Perspective. Because there's a lot of books out there that I can't write. I don't have the perspective for it. But there's some people that, here again, can. And you should.
Yeah, absolutely. absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anyone else that could have written my first book, The Persian Asteroid. I
Right.
have a unique perspective. I'm an engineer. I do outer space resources. I had spent time in Turkey. Didn't get to go to Iran, but I did spend time in Turkey. I had the full spectrum of experiences needed to visualize that story.
Right.
So I will also say that you don't have to have all of the experiences that you write about, because there's also this wonderful thing called the internet and
That's
this
true.
little process called research. And, for instance, like I've never been to the cathedral in Washington, D.C. that I put in my book, but you can take a tour of that cathedral in my first book, because I took a virtual tour of said cathedral before writing that scene, because that's what I wanted. And so, like, there are resources out there that, you can live vicariously through someone else's stories, or you can, look it up, do the research, that kind of thing. So yeah, you can cut corners sometimes.
Your career can be, I think the right word is, it can lift you, but it won't finish any of your stories.
Oh, yeah.
Because unless you're writing a memoir, an autobiography, it's you've got to use your imagination.
Oh yeah, I think every book needs the person, like the person has to finish it, like it has to have that connection. If you don't connect with the story, why are you writing it?
Yeah.
Right.
So if your autobiography, I'm going to repeat the meme and the joke. If your autobiography needs you to kill off a few characters, then it's not a very good story.
So there's a lot to, I don't know.
So let's talk about how our careers, like time wise, like how do we work around that? Because they get in the way, right? But
They
we
do.
all want to write. So like how do we navigate that part of having a real job?
Well, for me, the biggest thing is that I've had to recognize that my career in that makes me money has to still be a priority, even when I don't want it to be. Even if I'm resenting my career because I could be writing. Well, I think the best advice I got, I can't remember who said it. It might have been, it was basically a book about how creatives should not assume that they're going to be poor. But you can be your own, your own patron. So if you can consider your job a patronage, like Lady Catherine de Bourgh in Pride and Prejudice was the patroness of that obnoxious Mr. Collins. Well, she paid for his life, and so he could do his thing. So who is your patron? Oh, my patron is my day job. Is my day job my favorite place to be? No. But without it, I definitely can't pay for editors. Can't pay for food.
That's true.
Josh, how do you find time to write? Because you have a commute and everything else that goes with it.
Well, it's one of those things where you have to reinvent. Well, okay, so this new position I'm in, I've only had it for a little over a year now. Before that, I had a lot of time. Like, it was just a normal 40-hour a week job, and I could work, I could write 500 words a day. And now I don't have that. I work, 10 plus hours a day, 50, 60 hours a week. And I sometimes there's just some days there's just not there. Like I'm just tired. But I think over time, and I'm also kind of noticing now that the longer I'm in this position, the more I get used to it. And eventually I will get back to doing 500 words a day, even with this, because I think the important thing is that I've proven myself I can write a book. And this is just, and every book I've written since then has been a little bit more challenging. I've added a little bit more challenging, it's a little bit longer, it's a little bit more long, whatever. And now I just got to figure out how to do it with this. And like I said, now that I kind of understand what I'm doing now with my day job, because the first few months was just learning to do the job. And so now that I got that kind of under the belt, and like my brain, even though I'm tired, it's not taking up so much band space or bandwidth as it once was, because I kind of know what I'm doing, so to speak. So, but it is a challenge. So right now, I basically focus on the weekends. or I focus on the days that I do have shorter days, which doesn't happen very often. I take, annual leave sometimes, but I have this insatiable need to write. But also, I'm not in a project currently either. So that's another thing too. Yeah, if you're in a project, well, then there's a lot more of a fire under your rear, so to speak, because it's like, I got to get this done. Right now, I'm in the editing stage of my urban fantasy, so that's kind of where all the energy's. Well, I'm not doing it; my wife is, but but that's kind of one of those things where I'm just kind of like, this is my period of like, I'm not doing anything. But here in the next month or so, I'm gonna get that itch, and I'm gonna have to start another project. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you have to deal with those frustrations that come with, it's like a friction almost, especially if you are, and I hate that, being busy and in the middle of a project. That's why, like, the whole month of May, I'm like, I don't even have possession of my manuscript. Like, it's with my editor because I can't. Like, I just cannot with, I'm talking to people all day, every day, and that's fun. But I can't write and do that at the same time. I can't switch those gears very easily.
Now, when I was doing when I was finishing up the urban fantasy, when this probably January timeframe, yeah, I was doing 500 words a day, probably 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So
that adds up too. Golly,
yeah, I mean, it all adds up.
Yeah.
And then I try to catch up on the weekends too. So on the weekends, I try to do a couple writing sprints, and that's something I started focusing on too, because 25 minutes, right?
Yeah.
25 minutes is nothing. Even during the week when you're busy, like 25 minutes is really nothing. So, I did a writing sprint, and if I only wrote 200 words, I did a sprint.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You learn to adjust and grow as you go.
And be thankful for the income.
Yeah. No, I'm very grateful. I'm grateful that yes. Mm-hmm. Although I would like to learn how to do dictation, because I do drive a lot, and it would be nice to figure out how to. I've heard some authors have switched to dictation or things of that nature, where they write as they're doing something else, and I'm like, man, that I don't think my brain works that way. I don't think I could do that
either. Yeah,
but
I tried. I think with my fingers. I don't think with my mouth.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'll be typing, and something will come out. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Like something happened between here and there, and it just kind of happened. But yeah, I don't know.
I think I would self-edit too badly if I was trying to talk through it. I'd be like, no, I can't say that. No, I can't say that. I don't know.
I said that out loud.
Yeah. Who hurt me?
Why is that lady blushing over there?
I didn't think she wrote those kind of books.
Yeah, that's a different podcast.
Yeah. That's all right. So we are coming up on 38 minutes.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you think we should touch on?
I always want to end with some hope. You can make your career work for writing. It just may not be the way that you think. You just never know. Different seasons. Different seasons have different needs, and so This is where I'm grateful I have a relationship with God, because I turn it over to Him most of the time. I don't know what I'm doing anyway.
Do any of us really? I don't know. I will say that I would like to tell my mother happy birthday. I told her that I would say it out loud because today is her birthday. And so happy
birthday, Mom.
Happy birthday, Mom.
See? Yay, me.
Oh, and next week, I confirmed Dan Kenner is joining us on next week's podcast.
All right.
Oh, perfect. So we have someone to interview next week. Great.
Yeah.
So for the hope thing, yes, it seems overwhelming, and sometimes we romanticize things that we're doing, and the reality sometimes doesn't mix or doesn't meet our expectation. But every time you do it, you grow and you get better. And sometimes I think, this is a journey. There's no such thing as a destination. Everything that we focus on
either.
Yeah. Everything that we're focusing on is really just a mile marker on this highway of life. So, and if you look at it like that, and you realize that, hey, your book that you're writing is just a mile marker, because there's going to be another mile marker after that. Now, here again, that can be overwhelming, but if you look at it long ways, it's not so stressful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and remember, I didn't even start till I was 40. I'm 42 now.
I started when I was 42. and I'm 45 now. So,
No.
gosh,
He's
I'm old.
almost 40. No, you're not that old.
Yeah. All
Like a
right.
dad.
Jen doesn't want us
No.
to be that old because then she's catching up.
I'll never catch up.
Yes. Yes. All
Time
right.
travel, you will.
All right, everyone. Well, hey, we appreciate you spending your time with us this evening, or where, whatever you're doing now and you're listening to us, we appreciate you spending it with us. If you have any questions, like I said, be sure to reach out to us next week. Like we have a guest. What was his name? I'm sorry.
Dan Kinner.
Dan Kinner.
Yeah.
We look forward to that.
Be great.
And
All right.
until then, take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.